just human nature that we just don't take the time to take care of our own stuff the same way that we take the time to take care of our clients. If any client of yours came in and said, hey, can you review this contract for me? Can you give me, I've got these 2 insurance policies. Can you tell me which one I should? You'd go through and vet both of them and figure out which is the best one for them and lay it out for them. But are we doing that for ourselves? And I think that, we tend to fail to do so. Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. We spend a lot of time talking about marketing, some time talking about sales, a little bit of time talking about staffing, all kinds of things, COO, CFO. We don't spend a lot of time talking about risk management, and that's the conversation today. So if you have not been paying attention, pay attention now, because you may spend years building your law firm. It only takes one person's mistake. It doesn't have to be you, somebody in your business, to bring the whole thing down. And we don't want to do that. We want to protect ourselves. We want to make sure that we are properly covering our risks, that we have managed that and really ensured that if something were to happen, that there's somebody else that's backstopping that for us and not us ourselves. So our guest today, Mark Bassingthwaighte, is ALPS. ALPS is a malpractice insurer, and he is a risk management assessment person for them. He has this whole wordy bio that they gave me. I'm not going to read any of it except for this. He's a member of the State Bar of Montana and the American Bar Association, where he currently serves on the ABA Center for Professional Responsibilities Conference Planning Committee. He earned his JD from Drake University Law School. I want to give him that so that you know that you're talking to somebody who's walked your walk. He's, he knows what he's talking about, but he's also been with ALPS for a long time and worked with hundreds, maybe over 1,000 firms in assessing their law firm risk management. And he is definitely the guy that we want to talk to when it comes to this. Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we appreciate you spending your time with us and being here on the podcast and helping our listeners with this, very intricate topic. We had some conversation in the green room, and I've learned a little bit about where we might go with this discussion. But before we do that, people want to know who Mark is. And how in the world did you get into this? I mean, clearly you went and got yourself a JD. So,
Yes.
but when you did that, you probably weren't thinking of working in an insurance company. So, give us the broad strokes of your, just your story and how you ended up here.
Well, I went to law school a little bit later than normal. I didn't jump from college straight into law school. Um, but I got to a point in my early 30s where it was time, and I got my JD, and I was very much directed and heading into being a trial attorney. Really was good at that, wanted to do that. And then life just took some crazy turns. I was married to a physician, and placement, we moved for a practice reason, and that just changed everything. I did hang up a shingle and started that process. And then maybe a year and a half in, a new neighbor moved in right behind our house, and he and I got to chatting. And it turned out he was the first guy that was really going to come into ALPS, and ALPS is based in Missoula, Montana, although it's a nationwide company. And he did risk management, and he's not an attorney, but he, we were gabbing. I said, Bob, this sounds like a great job. Do you ever wonder would an attorney would else be interested in hiring an attorney to do this? And he kind of looked at me and said, wait, an attorney would do this? I said, yeah, an attorney would do this. You'd probably hire more than a few attorneys to do this. And I had to go through the whole process, but was very blessed to make it through, and have been with the company now for 27 years. And I want to underscore for folks, I'm not a traditional risk manager in the sense, of a CRO. I'm not hired to manage the risk of ALPS. I am hired to be now the national risk manager, which means I am a risk manager for the bar at large. My job, it doesn't cost any money to visit with me. You don't need to be an ALPS insured to visit with me. If I can do something to help lawyers, bar associations, et cetera, in terms of ethics, risk management, cybersecurity, do a lot of ethics work. That's what I'm here for. So it's a very non-traditional job in terms of an attorneys, but it's been a lot of fun. So one of these days, I'm going to write a book about it.
I
I'm going
love
to
it.
call
I
it.
love it. There's a book in every single one of us, and I
Oh yeah,
I plan on writing one, maybe many books as well. But it's one of those
yeah,
things, right? You got to have the time, or
yep,
find the who to do it for you. So,
yeah.
all right, Mark, let's jump into this conversation.
Okay,
So, we had some chats and before we started, and
yeah,
there's a place I want to start, and that
okay,
is cybersecurity risk.
yeah,
I want to start here because you made a comment to me and said, this is one thing that solos and smalls, they have their head in the sand. They kind of think that
yeah.
they're not a target, and and because they're not a target, they don't need to worry about this. So before we even talk about what is cybersecurity risk? Can you think of a story that happened to somebody
Mm-hmm.
where they were victim
Yeah,
and thought they were okay and didn't need to have protection? And then what was the result of that? Just paint that
yeah,
picture for me.
yeah. Here's a good one. Now, this is a firm that would be, 6, 7 attorneys, and they do a lot of real estate work. And they have their key people in the community they're working with, realtors, the title plant, there's this group. Um, they were involved in the sale of a commercial property. And when this was about to close, the realtor sent an email with a PDF attached that basically, I shouldn't say the realtor, the title agent, they're sending the closing packet. And there's this cover sheet with it that has the wiring instructions. So the firm is expecting this. They, it's coming from a known individual they've worked with over and over. They open all this, they see the wiring instructions, they move forward wiring, and they moved, it was something in the neighborhood of 700, between 700 and 50, around 750, somewhere in there, 50,000. And it turned out it was the wrong bank. And they discovered it relatively quickly, but not soon enough. And that was a complete loss for the firm. And I'll explain how it happens in a minute, but it was a complete loss for the firm because, folks, you need to understand this is, if you will, a property loss. Malpractice policies insure you or cover you for professional negligence, not for a property loss. So very few policies. There are a couple out there that may have some minimal limits for a loss like this, but we're not talking 750,000. We're talking, 50, maybe 100,000. And it's lots of cyber insurance policies also have sublimits. And those that do cover it sometimes also have requirements that you have to do certain things, which we can talk about here, or the coverage is in play. So in this situation, there was no cyber liability insurance, and there was no malpractice insurance. Now, here's what happened.
Now, before you
Uh,
talk about what happened, can I
yeah.
was this malicious or was this an error?
Oh, this was malicious.
Okay, so this
Oh
was
yeah. This is a
intention to
very this
defraud.
this is a wire fraud example, and this is happening way more than people realize. Here's what happened. The firm was breached and they had no idea. and somebody or more than one person, is watching everything that's going on. They're reading all the email, they're intercepting email, they're learning what this firm does, who the players are, et cetera, et cetera. And then they wait. They see this email coming. They open it. They see this is, here's some wiring instructions for $750,000. All they do is take a PDF editor, very quickly just change the routing number, and then forward it on. And you need to do this relatively quickly because, they know the email's coming. They intercept it. They have to change it quickly because they know they're expecting it at the law firm. So it's a fast change. And the firm says, this is a known and trusted source that it's coming from. It's the email address is accurate. Who the heck can intercept? And we just don't even think that this can happen. And so they don't question it at all. They wire the money as soon as the instructions come in, and that's that. Game, set, match. The bad guys won
You know,
because they're not thinking.
the interesting thing is that this is actually a pretty sophisticated
Yeah.
wire fraud example. The
Uh-huh.
reality is that if you think about, and I'm talking to our listeners, if you think about the process that you have in place for processing a wire right now, it probably doesn't need to be that sophisticated for you to accidentally send money to the wrong place. Somebody can send an email from the CEO to the person who normally does the wires. That just says, hey, such and such case just closed. I need you to send a wire in this amount to this account, and that could be a perfectly normal way of doing business, which means that there's no checks and balances. That person who does the wire is not going to call the CEO or the owner of the firm and say, "Hey, did you just send this email telling me to send this wire to so and so?" And what ends up happening is that boom,
Yeah.
you just fell victim to wire fraud. Wire fraud is a very scary thing. And what's crazy is that a simple duplication of checks and balances, meaning having a process in place to always verify verbally the information before proceeding with the party that you need to verify it with will eliminate pretty much like 99% of the possibilities.
Yeah.
Um, but of course, you can also have protection to backstop that, right? Like
You
the
can.
one time that somebody doesn't follow the procedure can cost you $750,000. And how many firm owners listening to this podcast can afford to lose $750,000? Right? Even the firms who are making 7-8 million a year, that's their margin.
That's right.
That's a year, a half year's profit. To suffer such a loss, and then on top of that, I mean, talk about the tax effect, right? And I don't even want to go down this rabbit hole, but you may not be able to deduct a loss like that directly as a business expense on your return, which means that you might be responsible for some of the taxes on that money, even though you never got it. So, really scary stuff. So, this is just like one piece of cybersecurity. Like wire fraud is just one
Oh, yeah.
aspect of it.
Yeah.
What are some other risks that somebody has when it comes to cybersecurity?
Uh, Ransomware is pretty big.
Hmm.
And it's now, a lot of people don't realize there are, if you will, companies out there, software as a service kind of models. The cyber criminals have gone into this space, and it's the folks that are doing ransomware, they really do have, there are times they show up for work, they can be bonus. Now, sometimes these are very horrible working conditions and people are forced to do this. But other situations, it's run just like a corporation and they are wildly successful. We are talking billions of dollars. And again, a lot of solo small firm lawyers really think this will never happen to me. And part of the reason is we're not going to be on anybody's radar. And So what they, what's the ransom? You see these things for 40 million. No law firm, trust me, size doesn't matter. They just adjust the ransom demand, and they're going to hit you 2 or 3 times because there's always data exfiltration now with these. And a lot of people also think I would recognize these scams. I wouldn't be fooled. The day of an age of poorly written email with the horrible English and the poor spelling and all of that, that has long since passed. And it's even better because guess what's been brought to the table? Generative AI. And these things, they are very sophisticated. And if you get hit with ransomware, um, that is not good. But there are easy things to do. You had talked about with wire fraud. Basically, what you're talking about is an out-of-band communication. We have to reach out and separately verify these instructions from previously verified information. Well, ransomware, the best thing you can do is just have a good, well thought out backup process. It's because this gets very, very costly. And a lot of firms, they may have some basic cyber coverage, but I would look for some serious coverage, a minimum of 250, 500, something like that, if not a million.
Now, okay,
Uh,
so let me pause here for a moment.
yeah.
First of all, I don't know if you know this, but I spent 20 years in the IT industry before venturing
Ah,
into this accounting world. And part of my story is that when I went through my divorce in '06, I had this moment where I was kind of like reevaluating my whole life. And one of the things that I thought about is like, what do I want to be known for?
yes.
And as I tell the story, I didn't want to be known for resurrecting servers from ransomware in the middle of the night. Rather, I wanted to, make a positive impact on the world in a different way. And that's really why I started the business that I'm running right now. Um, but interestingly enough, you don't actually need to open an attachment in an email or click a link in an email for ransomware to be successful. They can target your router for your
Yep.
internet. And if it doesn't have appropriate firewall mechanisms in place, they can get into your network and access your computer. I mean, it's scary stuff when you think about it. And if you don't know what you're doing, which I would assume that 90% of attorneys listening to this podcast probably don't have any IT background whatsoever.
Yeah.
Um, you may not have protections in place, and you may be at risk of somebody hitting you. And if they hit you for ransomware for, say, $20,000 or $30,000, do you have the ability to cough that up right now? If you're a solo, probably not,
Hmm.
right? And even
Yep.
if you did, right? Would you want to? Probably not. But I ask you this. So think what is ransom? Like people are like, oh well, what is ransomware? Does it mean I can't use my computer? I'll go to Costco, buy another computer. What's the big deal? Well, what it does is it accesses every file that your computer has access to and encrypts it. So if you think that your OneDrive or your Google Drive is protected, you're mistaken because how do you access it? Most of you probably have an application installed on your computer that makes it a drive on your machine. So there's the little piece of software that runs is going to encrypt all of the files in your Google Drive. Now, you could probably go into Google Drive and restore previous versions of each file one at a time, right? But I mean that would take you years to do if you look at the quantity of files you have, unless you just started your practice. So you're really held over a barrel, right? Like you got to pay the ransom. And then,
Yeah.
so now the question is, so the protection covers you so that the ransom's covered, right? You don't have to think about, oh, how am I going to recover this? I'll just pay the ransom, go to my insurance and get that. Mark, is that how the insurance works? And does the insurance want you to try to um, rectify the issue technically or with the authorities, or they're just here, you're covered, pay for it?
More and more, you first off have to um, answer a number of questions. The underwriters are going to want to know, are you taking appropriate steps to try to prevent these various types of attacks. And if you just go through and answer, yes, 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 I do this, I do that, and do the other thing, but actually aren't, and then once, say, a ransomware attack occurs, the forensic guys come in and they get to work and they discover you actually weren't doing all of these things. You have no coverage. You know, this is all hands on deck kind of thing. The insurance company and the insureds, IT support all need to work together. So you need to be aware of that. The other thing I would add is please understand, folks. Let's say that you get hit with ransomware and you have some backups and you think, okay, I can get back up and running. So I'm going to deal with this. I'm not going to really worry too much about insurance. I'm not going to lose a whole lot of sleep over ransomware because if we get hit, I've got good backups or immutable backups. We're doing this all right. Understand ransomware now, they do much more than just encrypt. First, they're going to take all the data. So even if you were to pay your uh, ransom to get a decryption key, or refuse to pay and recover yourself, they're going to come back and say, well, we still have all this data. Now, if you don't want us to release this, and they will also reach out and talk to your clients and put pressure on them. If your lawyer doesn't pay up, we're going to do all sorts. So if this is your worst nightmare. You really, really don't want to get involved in this. So I am all about prevention.
I understand that, Mark, but here's the thing: like buying an insurance policy isn't going to prevent it from happening, right?
Right.
It's going to manage the risk of the after effects of it happening. The
Yes.
reality is that probably even the smallest of firms needs to have some sort of IT expert or cybersecurity expert
Yeah.
review their systems, make sure that they are protecting themselves in the best way possible,
Yeah.
which might include two-factor authentication for all of your stuff. It might
Absolutely.
include, having a password manager that you're using, so that you can randomize your passwords and not having passwords that you're remembering and saving and reusing the same password from one thing to the next. It might include, having a backup system in place so that your data is backed up. It might include having some sort of written security plan,
Hmm.
training for your staff to mitigate the possibility of somebody doing something, responding to a phishing email or clicking on a link that they shouldn't click on or opening a file they shouldn't open. I'm going through this now with my mother-in-law, right? Like I've been trying to train her
Oh,
on
yeah.
what to ignore when it comes in because she calls me freaking out. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning and she's like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh, my Facebook's been hacked." How do you know,
Yeah.
mom?
Been there.
Well, I got an email from Facebook that says I've been hacked, and
Yeah.
I should call this number and give them my name and my social and my and I'm like, no, 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 don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Oh, good Lord. Yeah.
I think that there's mitigation of the activity which requires you to engage in some sort of, professional that's going to do that. And then there's the insurance side of it, which is mitigating
Yeah.
the financial risk. And there's another risk that needs to be discussed, which is um, the risk of your firm's name in the community, right?
Oh, yes.
Because if
Reputational
you
damage.
if
Hmm.
you if you go and now you've got to notify every one of your clients that your systems have been compromised, uh, information may have been leaked. Um, I mean that is probably every attorney's worst nightmare, right behind the trust account not balancing.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So what I mean, like looking at that, reputational damage, is that something that could be covered by insurance, and how in the world do they measure
Yeah.
that?
Cyber cyber policies will respond to that and do provide coverage, and they will help take care of some of the costs, in terms of complying with the breach notification laws and working. It depends on what's happened. Every one of these breaches is different, but yes, coverage is available for this kind of stuff. Absolutely. But you need to look, folks. As odd as this may sound, I mean, cyber coverage has been out there, oh, I don't know, for at least 20 years, if not a bit longer. Um, but it's still considered very much in its infancy. So there's a wide variance of what's covered, what's not covered, and it just I all I can see is you need to do a little research and a little shopping. So, but
Well,
I would,
Mark, this becomes a challenge, right? We're here on a
yeah,
podcast. We're telling people, look, this is a big risk. This is something you need to protect against. But at the same time, there's no comparing apples to apples. You kind of need to
um,
shop around and check each policy and do your due diligence, your research. That's the thing that's going to prevent people from actually moving forward and doing it.
I
So might I
understand that.
might I suggest that if you know of a provider that provides it, get a policy in place and then do your research. So this way, at
Oh,
least you
there
have
you go.
some sort of coverage,
Yeah,
even if it's not the
yeah,
best or not exactly
yeah,
what you want, but you've got
yeah.
something in place.
Hmm.
And then you can rest, you can at least sleep at night, do your research, assign it, actually just delegate it to somebody on your staff, right? Like find
Well,
every single provider that does cybersecurity, look at all the differences, give me a spreadsheet comparing the pros and cons of each one, or what's included, what's not included, what are the policy limits, what's the cost, and then sit with me for 30 minutes. Let's go through it and make a decision.
yeah. Or work with a broker that really understands the legal marketplace. The legal space.
Hmm.
There are a lot of brokers out there that do all sorts of stuff. Um, and it's work with somebody. ALPS is, as an example, is a company that all we do is insure lawyers. So I would
Now,
encourage you to reach out.
Alps is not a broker, right? Alps is an insurer, or they're a broker.
We do both.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we write our own, and we in terms of our business insurance side, we place that, and we have our own cyber policy that's sort of it's a good deal. I'll be honest and say this isn't world-class coverage or anything like that, because what we have tried to do very intentionally is sort of what you're alluding to. We want to allow an entry point to some cyber coverage at a price point that lawyers will be inclined to take.
Hmm.
And then as we educate and work with them, we can steer them, for those that are interested, into what I would call standalone coverage. And these are much broader, better policies. And, most firms that start to go into the coverage do that. Once they get in, they start to realize, oh, wait, okay, and they get a little more educated, and then they get to where they really should be. And it's just a process, a natural evolution, I guess, when it comes to insurance.
Yeah, this is all really, really interesting stuff. Let's detour for a second because I mean we've
Okay.
spent a lot of time on cybersecurity. I think this is a really important topic, but I also think that this is one that people are very easy to dismiss,
Yeah.
and perhaps we should focus on it just for that reason. But I think we just did. Let's just switch gears to just plain old malpractice, right?
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
what I mean, probably every attorney listening to this podcast already has malpractice coverage.
Yes.
What's the
Well, actually,
difference
that's
between
not
one?
true. That's not true. You'd be surprised, particularly in the solo small space, but it can get up into some mid-tier firms. It's the coverage rates are not at 100%. There are some regions and jurisdictions where the number of uninsured attorneys are in the neighborhood of 30 to even 50% of the
Oh, wow.
population, the attorney population in a given area.
Wow.
It's a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I just kind of
Yeah,
assumed, I guess, because every
no,
attorney I talk to, they talk about how malpractice insurance is one of their big expenses, blah blah blah.
yeah,
But it's interesting. Let's talk about the coverage for people who don't have it. Obviously, there's a need for it, and maybe we should address that. But for the people that have it, I'm assuming that the coverage is not apples to apples as well. Like, what are the things that they should be looking for when it comes to that coverage? And then, are there considerations? I'm piling a few questions onto you because we're
yeah,
coming
that's
to the
right.
end of this episode. I want you to just kind of like get a few minutes of floor space for this. Um, when it comes to adding personnel, so I'm bringing on another attorney, is there
Yeah.
something that I should be considering when it comes to malpractice insurance that might not be as simple as just adding them to the policy?
Okay, well, let's talk about differences first.
Sure.
The biggest thing that people aren't always aware of is the difference between defense costs being inside or outside of limits. These are very, very different pieces, are types of policies. And often attorneys will think they're comparing apples to apples. It's 250, 500, per claim aggregate. Same deductible, but one policy is way cheaper than the other. And they say, well, I'm going with the cheap one. And what they're buying without realizing it is policy, our defense costs are inside limits. So what that means is if I have a claim and I submit, for every dollar that the company now starts to spend on defense, there's $1 less to indemnify or to pay out on the loss, right? So you think you have a policy for $500,000, but if you have a claim expense that's already at $250,000 before this thing settles, you only have 250,000 left. That's why it's cheaper.
Hmm.
Outside limits is outside limits. Now, it's not, so typically you might see something like 50% of the per claim limit is available for defense. So if I have 500,000, 1 million, I'll have 250,000 available for defense without starting to cannibalize what's available for the loss payout. So now when I'm paying money for a policy and I think I have 501 million, you're getting for almost every situation exactly what you think. That money will be available there. So that's one of the differences to think about, and it can be very significant. There are others where that's a conversation for another day. When it comes to adding attorneys, that they need to be reported. So for instance, sometimes firms will bring in contract lawyers. Um, if you're a contract lawyer, first off, don't assume you're covered. That's may or may not be, but even if it is, it has to be reported. So you report when attorneys come, and in some situations, depending on the circumstances, sometimes limited stay contract attorneys, the premium doesn't get changed at all. In other situations, it does. There's, and anytime an associate or partner, anybody else, lateral moves, et cetera, there's going to be an impact on premium. The thing that you need to think about, though, particularly with these lateral moves, is do you want to pick up the prior acts exposure of a lawyer coming on board? I mean, if somebody has, 25 years of experience before they're coming into your firm, you need to be intentional about saying, what are we going to pay to cover? I'll be the guy coming in Mark's exposure for the last 25 years. I would tend to suggest I would more try to shy away from that and start Mark fresh, and then Mark would need to get a tail for his prior acts. Now, sometimes firms will pick that up. In my mind, I'd rather pay the cost of a tail versus assume an unknown amount of exposure for 25 years. I mean, that can be way more than the cost of tail coverage. So but whoever pays, sometimes you can split it. I mean, there's no rule here, but I would tend to be cautious about picking up prior acts.
Yeah. Really interesting stuff and things that we may not think about. And that's why I was really excited about having Mark here to kind of give us some insight and make us aware. And what's interesting is you think and I need to be careful about how I say this, right? Because I'm not trying to insult my audience. I already made that mistake once recently. Um, but you think that attorneys are trained to cross the T's, dot the I's, read the fine print, and all of that. The reality is when it comes to operating our own business, we act just like any other business owner.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's not a knock on the profession or anything like that. It's just human nature that we just don't take the time to take care of our own stuff the same way that we take the time to take care of our clients. If any client of yours came in and said, "Hey, can you review this contract for me? Can you give me, I've got these two insurance policies. Can you tell me which one I should?" You'd go through and vet both of them and figure out which is the best one for them and lay it out for them. But are we doing that for ourselves? And I think that, we tend to fail to do so. So, having these conversations, bringing them to light just kind of makes us more aware, makes us better consumers of the, of the, the possibilities that are out there, what we should be looking for. And so we're asking the right questions. But I think at the end of the day, when it comes to it, having a broker sounds like the perfect solution, right? Like, just have somebody who this is what they do for a living. They can educate you. They can make sure you're
Yeah.
protected. They can make sure that you're asking the right questions. So maybe we don't try to go this alone. Maybe we try to align ourselves with a broker who is really knowledgeable in the legal industry. And maybe you reach out to Mark to find out who that might be, get a recommendation. But this is the tail end of the episode. We were we had so much fun here behind the microphone that we've run out of time already, and I had so many other things I wanted to talk to you about. So maybe we do a round two at some point.
I'd
Um,
love to anytime.
Awesome. I appreciate that. My team will set that up. They will, they listen to this and they're like, "Oh, we got to set up another one." We'll give it a little bit of space so people don't get bored of listening to you, but we will bring you back. Um, Here's what I'd like to do to close out the show. I do this with every one of my guests. Number one, what
Yeah.
is one parting piece of advice or wisdom you want to share with our listeners? Number two, how can they take the next step of getting in touch with you, getting to know you,
Okay.
or anything that you want to share with them as a parting, gift or something like that?
The number one thing that you can do, here's a parting thought. When it comes to managing risk, and I really believe some ethical, discipline type exposure, malpractice risk, the number one thing you can do, folks, and hear me clearly, I've been at this for a long, long time, take care of yourself. Prioritize self-care. Self-care is not selfish, okay? Nurture your support systems. You will get more ROI on that from reducing your risk than any other step. And we could talk for hours of other steps you could take. That's number one. How you can reach me is I'll give you my email address, mbass, BASS, at ALPS Insurance, ALPS Insurance, one word, .com. And I'd be happy to visit. We also have a website and a lot of resources up there, www.alpsinsurance.com. And again, there are sample forms, lots of resources. If any of you have any interest, and I have a cyber guide, I'd be happy to make available. Even if you'd like to put a link, I can make that available to you. And then anybody that wants it is certainly, and it's obviously directed exclusively toward lawyers. So
Absolutely.
lots of
What we'll
things.
do,
So,
yeah, what my team will do is we will link that up in the show notes. I'll get that
okay.
that link from Mark, and absolutely we'll share that out. So folks, so you can download it. It in your podcast player in the description beneath the episode, you'll find all of our resource links in the resources section. As well, you can go to profitwithlaw.com, and you can see it there. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'll as well be in the description underneath the video that you're watching. Marcus, this has been a great conversation. I love talking about these kinds of things because, this is the stuff that if you had listened to the episode and you took action
Yeah.
on it, we could have saved your bacon. And maybe 2-3 years down the road, somebody is in that situation like, oh man, you remember that episode I listened to? I should have done something about it. Then they'll come back and listen to everything else we say. So, no, but really, this is like, uh, honestly, risk management is one of those things. And I'm going to close with this. I'm going to talk about pet insurance for a moment. So we adopted a dog. My wife grew up with a dog, and I did not. So we have our dog for a very brief while, and then my in-laws' dog passes away. My wife takes me with her to go with her mother to a bereavement session at the animal hospital, and we're sitting around the table with these people who have lost their pets recently. And I mean, one is crazier than the next. And I'm not knocking animal lovers or anything. I'm an animal lover myself. But this one lady is talking about how her cat had cancer, and she's treating the cat, and she makes a comment like, if it would have saved her, I would have mortgaged the house to save her. And
Ah,
we left there, and I looked at my wife and I said, "Wow, can you imagine somebody would mortgage their house to save their pet?" And she goes, "Yeah, I would too." And it was in that moment that I realized we were getting pet insurance because I was never having a conversation about whether we're mortgaging the house to save the dog.
yeah,
So we went and got pet insurance, and at the end of Rascal Flatts's life, he ended up needing a lot of care. He had some things wrong with him that we didn't know were terminal, and we thought that we were giving him a new lease on life, and it was very costly, and there was never a question: should we do it? How should we pay for it? I mean, we had
yeah,
90% coverage, and we just said yes to everything. And that was my form of risk management for my marriage, right? Like, because we would have, we would have fought to the end for that one. Like, I just know, like, I would not have been willing to invest in, at that level for a pet, and my wife would have been. So, risk management is not just about saving your business; it's about all aspects of your life.
absolutely.
These things come and they happen, and it's not just what happens; it's also the decision of how you deal with it. Whether you fight something or lay down and take it has a lot to do with whether you've got funds in the bank to fight it with, right? So it's it's not just covering the bill, but it's also protecting your reputation, standing up for yourself, and all of those things. This is not something to be taken lightly, and something that I think you should go back and listen to this episode again. Get in touch with Mark, get a broker, make sure that you're adequately covered, because folks, we're working so hard to build our reputation, to build a business, to build something that is successful, that's impactful in the community. Let's not give it all up for one bad actor. All right. This is an amazing episode. Thank you, Mark, for being here. Folks, we are here every single Thursday with a brand new episode. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel yet, go there at profitwithlaw.com/YouTube. Hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time we release a new video. We have over 1,000 videos on our YouTube channel. Really a lot of great content. Here on the podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube, go over to at your favorite podcast player, find us, Profit with Law, and hit subscribe there because you can listen to us on the go without watching anything. And we're here every Thursday with a brand new episode where we interview the greatest minds in legal to help you with your law firm growth. Take care, folks. We'll see you next week.